In August 1919, the great psychologist Alila was diagnosed with polio, a debilitating virus that spread throughout the United States in the early 20th century. The then 17-year-old heard her pediatrician say that she would die the next morning. Hours turned into days, days into weeks. She is paralyzed below and can only move her eyes. The disease has forced Alila into silence. But even though it is very boring, she will not play the victim anymore. Her brother, with whom she could silently observe life in a new way, said to her, "Choose a monotonous one, this is a great idea," and grinned to himself at the same time. He really meant it. She began to notice the facial expressions her sisters made when they talked. And she observed silently, using them as a study area where she could tell whether they were real or not. Eventually, she knew how to read her sisters' expressions, and by extension other people's expressions, whether they were nervous, happy, sad, or jealous. She had discovered how to decode human expression by taking advantage of the silence that once bored her. This example from the law of human nature illustrates the fact that it is not that we are communicating badly, we are missing a lot in our conversations with others. We are either talking too much about ourselves or not listening enough. When a person you care about asks for advice and tells about their troubles and how frustrated they are, you immediately start examining their problems and tell them that they should do this and that, otherwise all their troubles will continue. By the way, you never realize that those who do not want your advice are just looking for your ear. Sometimes people just need to be listened to, but we interpret their silence or disappointment as an invitation to step in and save the day. This is not a Stoic response, and it is certainly not something an effective listener would do. He or she can engage with the speaker's message through nonverbal participation, such as gently nodding and maintaining eye contact. Express interest. Visual cues let the speaker know that we are following and have our attention. Avoid paraphrasing the speaker's message, such as, "So what are you saying?" or "What I heard." These types of responses often lead to judgment and are absolutely unhelpful to the person who wants to be heard. In fact, it can make them feel worse. Encourage the speaker to elaborate on their beliefs or feelings by asking the speaker to go into more detail with what they have to say. We show that we care, we show empathy, we do not demonize or judge them. By listening more and talking less, we begin to understand the problems of others and therefore become better equipped to help them. Always express gratitude to those who help. Be silent about the services you have done but talk about the favors you have received. Start a conversation with someone who only talks about himself. How many times did you find yourself in a social gathering or professional setting when you started? They may be talking about a promising project they are working on or a recent success. You can't help but wonder, were they the only ones who did this? Did they not have anyone to help them in their efforts? When we allow our conversation to be driven by the ego, we leave no room for gratitude. Also, express our gratitude instead of telling everyone how great we are. It goes without saying that much fewer words are required, which helps us along the way when asked about our achievements by others. It is in our interest to talk about many people and thank them. I have great mentors, or I wouldn't be here without the help of my team. A 20-minute monologue is a much shorter and more meaningful response. It teaches us to look at our lives outside the box so that we can be as objective as possible when detecting our mistakes. As athletes, we also do what we do with others. We should do the same in conversations. We've all been there, looking at the distorted looks on others' faces when we've said something wrong or said something out of line. It's perfectly natural to say the wrong thing. In fact, it's inevitable. But if we use it as an excuse to say it whenever we want, we're bound to damage the people and relationships we care most about. Epictetus famously described the duality of control. An ingenious way of understanding what is within our power to change and what isn't. Essentially, Epictetus is out of our control. Examples of this include motivation and desire speech, which says that what is underneath is the things we do, what is out of our control are things we don't do. Things like our reputation, social status, and the circumstances we were born into. Make no mistake. It is extremely difficult to control what we say and how we say it. If it were easy, we would all talk in a silver voice. But knowing that speaking is our own doing, we can begin to hold ourselves accountable for what we say. Next time you find yourself socially in an environment or a serious discussion, remember to slow down mentally before responding to someone or going off topic. Dear user, use this space to think about what you are about to say, whether someone has misunderstood this, or whether it is truly a valuable contribution to the conversation. We often find ourselves responding almost reflexively to what we hear. Suppress this urge, really think about what you are going to say and how you are going to say it. When you begin to practice this kind of Stoic self-awareness, you realize that most of the things we think of saying are better left unsaid. Perhaps the most common scenario in which we lose the ability to communicate effectively is when we argue with others. In highly stressful, highly emotional moments when we desperately want to win or prove to someone else's lot, we lose everything we have ever worked on in terms of self-control. Athletes often refer to anger as temporary insanity. Because our anger is out of control. When it takes over, we completely lose our ability to reason and communicate with others. When someone objects or says something we don't like, we immediately become defensive. Instead, a stronger response is simply silence. When faced with an angry, emotional person, resist the temptation to follow their tone. Just as a matador runs away from an angry bull, we should do the same when confronted with anger. Stay calm, be quiet, and respond with kindness when the time is right. Your reaction, the more measured it is, the more likely it is that the other person will realize the error of their ways, and that you will both be more likely to leave the interaction satisfied. Be mostly silent, or if you do speak, say only what is necessary and in a few words. Speak only rarely if the opportunity calls, but do not talk about mundane things like gladiators, horse races, athletes, or food and drinks. These are topics that arise everywhere. Epictetus is too much for quiet people. There is criticism because they refuse to label themselves. Or we say they have not yet labeled themselves. In reality, silence is better than talking in vain. If you knew the exact number of breaths you had left before you ran out, would you spend it commenting on the weather or some other unimportant issue? It is not the quantity but the quality of words that matters. Seneca writes about it, life is like a play. It is not how long it is, but how good it is. The same goes for what we say when talking about ourselves. In your daily conversations, try what it feels like to say more by saying less, not the number of words you use. Make a conscious effort to improve its quality. You will find that you waste a lot of breath, but now you can save them for when real problems arise. Visualize the worst-case scenario and then go through it. Silence is a lesson learned from many pains in life. The difficulties of life. About silence, it can affect a person in two different ways. Wrong. We are afraid to open our mouths because we are afraid to say something, or only when we have something valuable to say. Since we speak, we choose silence as a kind of wisdom. Those who are uncomfortable with the first one right now are not alone. Since 2013, various studies have been conducted trying to find out what society's biggest fears are. Consistently, public speaking and death ranked at the top. In some years, public speaking ranked first, while death was in the second place. We live in a society that even thinks about dying rather than engaging in some kind of conversation. Luckily, the Stoics' feeling of the unknown is. He had a great trick for overcoming fear. Lo meditation malorum premeditation of evil is a Stoic exercise that involves imagining everything that could go wrong in our lives. The idea behind this is that if we can imagine our worst fears and experience the emotions attached to them, then we are better suited to overcome them when they actually arise. By doing this exercise, you are already faced with the worst-case scenario in your mind. Cognitive behavioral therapists call it disaster. Because the world we live in is full of noise every hour of the day. When the sun rises, we walk too slowly on the highway. When the sun rises, phones ring and cars honk their horns. Trains pass in the distance at night, and your neighbor sitting above you hears the sound of the TV. The excesses that surround us are seemingly inevitable but are not all bad, whatever the scenario, some like a quiet friend asking you for advice, or hearing the words, "I love you," spoken with pure honesty. Whatever the obstacle in front of us, modern story should always remember that silence is a form of mastery worth striving for. See you in the next post, my friends. All the best. May it be with respect and love.